Hi there, and welcome to this installment of the Cultivate Producer Social Series, Product Photography 101, Tips and Tricks for Producers. I'm Kitty. You guys mostly know me as the User Guide Coordinator for the Iowa Food Foundation, which is now Cultivate, where I work on teaching and empowering our producers to manage and improve their profiles. I am also an insufferable home baker of gluten-free and vegetarian baked goods and a food Instagrammer. Actually, Hillary asked me to teach this class after seeing the product photography I did for a fake producer catalog that I'm using to update the screenshots in the user guide. I am strictly a hobbyist photographer. I was taught by my grandfather, Don Moore, who worked in film and television in the Northeast for a really long time. But other than that, I don't really have any formal education in photography. I've done grant and archival photography for Canterbury Shaker Village Museum and the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, and event photography for Dr. Sketchy's NYC when I lived back east. But again, that's all on the merits of self-teaching. I am not a professional. We didn't want this class to be taught by a professional. We wanted it to be taught by someone who taught themselves. And you don't need to be a professional photographer either to get pretty decent results. Today, I'll be showing you some tips and tricks to improve your product photography using tools you have in your home and probably in your pocket. Do's. Have a clean, distraction-free background. Have bright, even lighting. Make sure that your image is in focus. If you have branded material, make sure it's included and clearly visible. Make sure your product is the focal point of the image, and consider the appeal of color and texture, especially if you are the kind of producer that is selling a food item. Those two items are going to be particularly important for you to emphasize in your product photography. Here's some examples from the existing catalog. I went through and pulled out some good stuff that I found from people who already produce and sell through the Iowa Food Co-op. So here you can see these examples are all from Pickle Creek, which makes all kinds of things from these flavored dipping oils to soap, chapstick, all kinds of stuff. You can see here I really like the way they've staged this sage and rosemary soap. See how it has a very clean white background. There's no distractions. You're just looking at the soap. They've staged it so that their logo is clearly visible, their branded packaging is clearly visible, and they've also staged it with these two pieces of fresh herbs that help embody to the viewer what that soap is going to smell like and really emphasizing the freshness of it, the sort of authenticity of the ingredients of the soap. And it looks really nice. Really invokes the sense of like cleanliness and freshness that you want in your images. For this picture of the chapstick, they've also gone for a plain background, though they have decided to add visual interest by using a textured backdrop. This looks like barnwood. Again, sort of really invoking that like homemade feel. And again, you can see they have branded packaging that's clearly visible, and you're just focusing on the product. The flavored oils on the right are staged a little bit more simply. This is a really good solution for those of you that don't necessarily have or want a dedicated shooting space in order to communicate what they needed to do in this image, which is the fact that the item Greek basil and garlic dipping oil comes in these three sizes. They've just staged it against as plain of a background as they could get, which is this stack of boxes. And that is a really decent option. If you need it, a totally plain background would be better, or a backdrop like this barnwood would be great. But if you need to, just get that image onto a background that is as distraction-free as possible. Here's some other examples that have a little bit more staging to them from some of our producers. This slide has a variety of images that showcase texture and ingredients and use very basic light, such as the light that's coming in from outside, probably through a window, if not done on a porch or outside. Just really utilizing that natural light. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a later slide. I particularly like this backdrop of the spice blend, which with something like a spice blend, you're not going to see the individual ingredients like you can with the soup on the left. And so this producer has decided to make a backdrop from the fresh herbs and spices that are in the spice blend. And I think that that's a really good way to showcase what you're working with. It was really creative and I really liked it, so I included it. You can also see here in this photo of the Sola Gratia gluten-free sourdough bread that they've put a lot of emphasis on texture, which if you are a person who has ever had a gluten-free baked good, you know that that can be sort of a gamble. And the fact that you can see the inside of this bread, you can see what the crumb might be like. It looks really chewy, it looks really light, and is very, very appealing to someone who is looking for that kind of baked good. Here's some examples of scene setting from very, very basic to a very professional plating of an item. On the left, we have these hand pies on a picnic blanket that sort of invoke summer and eating outside and an environment in which you might want to eat a delicious hand pie on a picnic or on your porch. Kind of the same with the Kelowna Half and Half down here on the bottom, which they've staged with a Kelowna branded coffee mug, just to help with making sure that you have that branded stuff in your images if you have it available, as well as setting a scene of having a nice cozy cup of coffee with some super fresh and delicious supernatural organic half and half. And then on the right, you have this gorgeous image from our Heritage Bison producer. All of their images are really, really good, which is saying something because it's really hard to get really good professional photos of meat. I know that that is something that our meat vendors consistently struggle with, but you can see in this case, they've staged it to invoke, both to showcase like the quality of the meat, but also invoke freshness and to suggest how you might prepare the item. It's just really, really good. If you check out their catalog on the IFC homepage or market, you can see more of that photography. And that's an example of going all out with it, you know, being staged professionally on like this beautiful 2-textured slate background with props. And you can go all out like that, or I really like the picnic blanket with the interesting, it looks like a vintage dish with the hand pies in it. But that's a range of things you can do to sort of set your scene to really make those items pop and look appealing and give them a sense of place and purpose when the consumer is looking at them. Don'ts. Don't include elements that are unrelated to the item. Setting a scene like I showed you in the previous slide is one thing, but don't include unrelated elements. I've seen some pictures from our vendors that include like really cute dogs. And I love all your dogs, but I really need to see your tomatoes or your cabbage or whatever it is you're selling. Consider putting a picture of your cute dog in your producer profile image instead. Don't upload low-resolution, grainy, or out-of-focus images. Customers are looking at the items in your catalog because they want to see what that item looks like, and that should really be very, very clear to anybody who's going through your catalog. So you don't want those low-resolution, grainy, sort of old internet pictures. And don't use an image that doesn't belong to you. The only exception to this might be that your image is from an approved stock library, which we'll talk about at the end of the presentation. Can't I just use an image of a similar item from Google? No, just because you can find an image on Google doesn't mean it's free for you to use. Images have copyright and usage rules, even if it might seem harmless to use them because they're out on the internet at large. We ran into this a lot at my old job where I worked for a scientific publishing group. Lots of people using illustrations and things that they would just pull from Google, and you cannot do that. In a situation like ours, you would be using an image that isn't yours for commercial purposes. You're using it to make money, and you can't use someone else's image to sell your product. Even if you are using a stock image from a stock library, there may be an indicator in their terms of use that you can't use it for commercial purposes if you are not paying for the image. Besides, the overall goal of the Iowa Food Co-op is to help producers represent themselves and their products to foster a personal connection with consumers. The way you present your products should be all you too, and that includes your images. You don't want to misrepresent yourself because you used an image that you did not take that is not of the products that you sell. However, if you have images that you've already taken for another site or page, say if you have a Facebook page or an Instagram or just a good old-fashioned website, you can definitely use those. You own the rights to those images, so go ahead and feel free to reuse them in our catalog. That's fine. IFC is also cultivating partnerships to form approved libraries of high-quality stock photos, though again, you really should be using images of your product to showcase all the hard work that you do. Lighting tips. No fancy setups required. So there are plenty of cheap directional and photo-specific lights you can get from, say, Amazon, but in most cases, the best light source you can use is free and widely available, except for right now when I'm giving this lecture, as I'm giving this talk going into the fall and winter months. I will always recommend that you use natural light if you can get it for your DIY product photography. It is very bright and very soft. You can take pictures outside, or you can use a nice big window. Now, there are things that you do want to keep in mind when you're considering lighting for your images. So you want bright, soft light. You want to avoid direct light, such as from a spotlight, like a lamp. That can cause heavy shadows. Sunlight is generally naturally diffused because it's so far away. Spotlights should be diffused through a translucent material, and I'll show you how some of that looks in a little bit. Be mindful of shadows. You don't want your item to be literally overshadowed by objects, the most common being you, or your phone, or your camera. Take your photos from an angle that doesn't cause your shadow to fall on the item. Here are some examples that I took outdoors using natural lighting. Obviously, for your catalog images, you're not going to include, say, a picture of your ugly home shoes, but just to give you an idea of how I staged this, which is that I put these beautiful apples from Red Barn Produce in a dish that I lined with this flour sack fabric, and then I took it out and then I found a really sunny spot on my lawn and set it down and took these really gorgeous pictures that really emphasized the brightness and the redness of those apples. And you can see it sort of has like this nice kitcheny, rustic feel with that flour sack fabric. One of the things you can do indoors is building or buying one of these light boxes. I made this out of a Chewy box from some cat food I got delivered and some materials I had lying around the house. Most of these things are very, very cheap. The insert is some poster board from Michaels. You can use plain poster board. I decided to use this barnwood texture because it was a little bit more interesting. There are holes cut in the side of the box, and then you can see that light from the spotlights, which I had from a previous project, but are pretty cheap, pretty easy to get your hands on, that I am diffusing that light through a piece of translucent pattern paper to help spread that light out and prevent those harsh shadows. I have also staged these items in an antique china dish just to add a little bit of interest and personality. It's a really good way to use items that you find at flea markets or maybe some old dishes that you have laying around. This is my mother-in-law's china that I inherited, and it makes for a really, really interesting dish to put things in, and is a good way to inject your personality into your images. We've talked a little bit about backgrounds, but here's a little bit more. And you can always use a background from your environment, walls, tables, floors, the grass, like I showed you earlier. There are options for studio backgrounds. There are lots of basic product backdrops and white boxes and stuff you can get on Amazon. You can also make your own. Two of the most basic backdrops for product photography are white boxes, which are these items. This box that's lined with reflective material and has cutouts for your lighting setup is an example of a very professional white box. You can see an image from the tutorial that I used to build mine below that's just made out of, looks like a file box with translucent paper and poster board. And using a white box will result in an image like this image of the soap, which has, you know, a very clean background, very distraction-free. This is actually from the catalog. I think it might be Pickle Creek, I'm not sure. But again, you're just getting an image of the product. There's also background drapes, like you can see on the right. This is an example of some textured drapes, like the one I used in my white box, that just go on these little clip stands that you would put your item on the front of the backdrop. The big thing is that the back is curved, so you don't get any shadows from a corner that the backdrop makes. You just want a nice, smooth, seamless background, and that drape really helps with that. You can also use fabric, though paper tends to be a little smoother. You can also use, W. Homestead has this image where they have a branded cutting board that showcases their logo, in addition to showcasing some of their really delicious butter. And here's Pickle Creek again with their barnwood backdrop. And this also looks like it was taken using natural light, so that's a good example of sort of that soft lighting that you get from that. So here's an example of some backgrounds that I have made. Again, here's another look at the light box without the product in it. I used sort of an awkwardly tall box. If I did it again, I would probably add another cutout at the top or go for something a little wider. I was thinking of photographing like a tall item, like a really big piece of celery, and I wound up not doing that. And again, like, this is a box I had laying around my house. We get lots of stuff delivered nowadays. It's a good way to recycle that item, and they last quite a while. When I do the in-person version of this lecture, I will bring at least one of these for folks to look at and use. We can talk about how to build them and things like that. The other thing I did was, on a day that I decided to make some German noodles, I took out, again, my flour sack fabric. I would recommend steaming it out. I should have steamed it. Looks a little wrinkly in this picture. And I'm going to stage these Grand River Farms duck eggs in a nest of Breadtopia gluten-free flour. And I decided I was going to use this Iowa-shaped cheese board that I got as a housewarming gift. Again, to showcase, emphasize that these items are local to Iowa. They are locally produced. And that's another thing that you can consider in terms of items and backgrounds to stage your stuff on. I also staged it with my KitchenAid to again emphasize that homemade feel. I wound up not using the resulting pictures for this project, but that sort of was my thought process when I was building that, and maybe it can help you think about the things that you want to include or ways you want to set things up. The backdrop is thumbtacked to the storage shelves above my baking workbench. Could also tack it to the wall. So, editing. Editing can be done on pretty much anybody's phone, right in your phone's photo apps. Default photo app should provide most of the basic adjustments you might want to make, such as cropping, which is when you cut an image down to emphasize focus on a particular area. Brightness, in case your image does turn out to be a little bit too dark. Contrast, which again improves the overall polished look of an image. But there's also plenty of third-party apps you can use if you want. I know a lot of people in sort of the DIY photography scene like things like Canva. If you are taking your pictures on a camera and uploading them to a computer, your computer probably also has an application that can do basic editing, such as Microsoft Photos. There's no need to spring for pricey art software if you don't want to, and if you do, look up a freeware alternative to exorbitantly priced Adobe products. If you want to edit your pictures that you took on your phone, you will have to upload them to your computer and then edit them on your phone. I transfer mine through Google Drive. You can do that a variety of ways. Email the image to yourself and then download it, etc. A quick refresher course for those of you that already list products with us. Resizing for our catalog. So most cameras nowadays, including the newest cell phone cameras, produce images that are too large for the software to store and may be rejected during the product listing process. But it's fairly easy to resize your images from your computer desktop before uploading. So I did this on Windows, since that seems to be, it's what I have, it's what most people have. I am assuming that Apple has a similar photo editing interface. So you're going to right click on the image you want to resize and go to open with, and then to photos. This is the default software that comes with your Windows operating system. Then you're going to right click on the image and select resize from the menu that pops up. And then you are going to select the best for profile pictures and thumbnails. So just make sure that the file size is less than 1024 KB. It should be, but just take note of that file size there. So since what the image is going to be used for is a catalog thumbnail, this is the best way it knows that it's going to size it appropriately for those kinds of dimensions and that kind of file size. So it's just easiest to go ahead and do that. It is recommended that you rename the file when you save it so you can tell which one is the correct size, such as product name, web version, or product name small or similar, and make sure that the file is saved as either PNG or JPEG. The system does not accept other formats. So alternatives to product photos. So we talked a little bit about the possibility of there being acceptable libraries of stock images for you to use. One of our board members, Inger Lamb, kindly sparked up a partnership with M Design Photography, and this means producers now have a library of stock images that they can access through this link. I will say that I will always encourage you to produce your own images, but I would highly recommend looking at the M Design photo library to get some inspiration for how to frame things, where to position your camera, the kind of backgrounds that you want to use, the kind of lighting quality that you're looking for. Definitely use it for inspiration if you don't necessarily want to use it as a stock library. Resources and places to learn more. There are lots of resources on the internet for learning more about product photography. There are websites like LinkedIn Learning and Skillshare that exist, though you have to pay for them. But actually, go ahead and check out your local library system to see if they have access to these services or similar. For instance, the Des Moines Public Library gives patrons access on a platform to a platform called Creative Bug that I found by accident while I was researching something else. I was curious and I searched and I found a product photography course that has some pretty handy tips, even if it was technically for jewelry. But the thing about jewelry is it's a small item where you are super emphasizing color and texture, which are the things that you should be emphasizing when you photograph the food and the products that you produce, but especially food. So that's free to people who have a library card. You can check that out. YouTube is also an almost infinite resource that offers free tips and tricks for a variety of interest and ability levels. Thank you for coming to this Cultivate Producer Social presentation. Like I said, I will be doing, hopefully, an in-person workshop version of this presentation in the spring. So keep an eye out. We will let you guys know when that is going to be available. And you can check out this and other videos in this series on the Iowa Food Co-op YouTube channel. Thanks.